Hey guys, so continuing on in the vein of the Transition Integrity Project, General Mark Milley released a letter today to two Democrat congresswomen. In the letter, he stood firm saying that the military would not be involved in the election whatsoever. As I've already gone over in previous videos, the Transition Integrity Project wargamed out several scenarios that could happen in the time period between Election Day and Inauguration Day. Several of these scenarios that they wargamed included the military having to intervene. General Milley was then sent letters by these Democrat congresspeople asking him what, if any, involvement the military would have in the election. The two Democrat congresspeople who sent this letter to him did not release his full letter that he wrote back to them. It's most likely that the reason why they didn't just release the letter that the general wrote to them and instead cherry-picked quotes is because there's some stuff in there they didn't like. Moving on. General Milley was the one who, after Trump went down to the church and had a photo taken of him with a Bible in his hand, General Milley is the one who apologized. He said he did not want to seem political and that it was absolutely important that the military remain apolitical, because we all know what happened to Mike Flynn was apolitical, because the treatment of General Petraeus was not political whatsoever. Okay, so the military clearly is political. They can say that they're not. But in this case, General Milley is saying in the election we will remain apolitical. The reason why these Democrat congresspeople wrote this letter to this general to begin with was part of the wargaming strategy to find out, this general, where are you willing to go? What lengths are you willing to go to? This is not the only letter that went out, and this is not the only response that they've gotten. You can bet that these people have reached out to friends that they have in business and in politics and in literally every aspect of life that you could think of. Yeah, and them approaching all of these business people and now these generals like this with these requests, it's really starting to remind me of, what was it called, like the White House coup or the business coup with General Smedley Butler. Yeah, that's him there. So, General Smedley Butler served 34 years in the Marine Corps and earned 16 medals for his time in service. He is currently the most decorated Marine veteran of all time and an all-American badass. Anyways, sometime in the early 30s, he's approached by some guy representing, I guess what you would call a consortium of the ultra-rich in America who didn't like FDR at the time because they were calling what he was doing with the New Deal communistic and such. And these guys were like literally fascists. Of course, one of the most name-recognizable gentlemen is, of course, Prescott Bush. Prescott Bush has actually been implicated in a lot of misdeeds throughout history, especially during the time period leading up to and during World War II. If one were interested, they could look that information up for themselves and find quite the deep rabbit hole. Suffice it to say, he was involved in this business coup. And isn't it interesting how now George Bush Jr. is endorsing the opposite political party for the same exact reasons? So they, of course, approached the wrong freaking general. General Smedley Butler proceeded to link up with a Philadelphian reporter and get these guys on record with a multi-witness account of the situation. He then went in front of Congress and testified. Now, all of the things that came out in that congressional testimony were sealed, and it wasn't until much later that he was vindicated. At the time, he was basically laughed off. That laughing off of history probably led to two presidents that would have never happened. Oh, and to even be more cheery, if you're one of those people who's still waiting on indictments, nobody got in trouble for this. But, alas, we've gone down a bunny trail. Let's get back on topic. We're talking about General Mark Milley's letter that he had to write to two congresswomen who were demanding to know what the military's role would be in the upcoming election, most likely spurred by the TIP report, the Transition Integrity Project, which outlines that the military will be involved during the time period between the election and inauguration. But anyways, let's read the article. The U.S. military has no role in resolving election disputes, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Mark Milley told congressional Democrats, pouring cold water on hopes the Pentagon would help them take the White House. And this is being painted as if it dashes some vague hopes of military intervention by the Democrats. That's not necessarily materialized even with the TIP report. However, the general's comments here do paint him into a corner. Would they go so far as to make a public request for information so that they could cherry pick and post up the response in order to paint the military into a corner in the event military intervention is needed at some point? Nah. I believe deeply in the principle of an apolitical U.S. military, Milley said in a letter to Representatives Alyssa Slotkin and Mickey Sherrill. The two members of Congress did not release the letter, but quoted excerpts from it in a statement on Friday. So here are the quotes that they chose to release. In the event of a dispute over some aspect of the elections, by law, U.S. courts and the U.S. Congress are required to resolve any disputes, not the U.S. military. Milley reportedly added, "We will not turn our backs on the Constitution of the United States." At first blush, this seems to dash the hopes expressed by some prominent Democrats in recent weeks that the military would help them remove President Donald Trump from the White House, assuming he loses the election but refuses to concede. Which is insane to me that this is exactly what Hillary accused him of doing the last time. He won, and then that's what she did. Drives me nuts. Former Vice President Al Gore was the latest to bring up the scenario. In a Reuters interview this week, two retired Army Lieutenant Colonels, John Nagel and Paul Yingling, attracted significant media attention earlier this month when they sent Milley an open letter via the outlet Defense One, outright demanding that the military oust Trump by force. So understand that these are lieutenant colonels in the United States military that are writing a general officer demanding that the military oust Trump by force. Imagine that. Quote, "If Donald Trump refuses to leave office at the expiration of his constitutional term, the United States military must remove him by force, and you must give that order," Nagel and Yingling wrote. The scenario was first voiced by the Democrats' presidential nominee Joe Biden, who brought it up during an interview in early June. He was absolutely convinced they will escort him from the White House with great dispatch, he told Daily Show host Trevor Noah, referring to the military. Biden's comments came as a number of former military officials spoke out against Trump, including former Defense Secretary Jim Mattis, a former JCS Chairman Mike Mullen, shortly before Biden's interview. Milley himself had apologized for his presence at Trump's side after the incident at Lafayette Park just north of the White House. The media coverage of the current and former military officials' statements made it seem as if they were inclined to support the Democrats. And the reason why is because this was all a coordinated media hit. We have Jim Mattis, who Trump demanded Jim Mattis's resignation because Trump didn't want to do in Syria what Mattis wanted him to do, which was what Hillary would have done, declare a no-fly zone over Syria, forcing us into a war with Russia. Trump not only didn't want to do that, but he wanted to pull all the troops out after he eliminated ISIS. Mattis had a problem with it, and out he goes. I personally, Mattis was one of my favorites. If you're not going to be anti-war when it comes time to start pulling people away from wars we've been in for over a decade, then you are part of the military-industrial complex. Therefore, it was no surprise that I saw him writing public op-eds about the President of the United States. To me personally, I find it disgusting. So you have Mattis, Mike Mullen, who is as deep state as it comes. Then Biden's announcement that Trump would have to be taken out. Then Nancy Pelosi makes the fumigation comment. And then I played for you recently that Hillary Clinton said that Biden should not concede the election under any circumstances. And now I have one more to add to the pile. Al Gore. He says if Trump resists defeat, troops will force him out, after Hillary Clinton said Biden should, quote, not concede. And again, these are all targeted. They're all happening at the same time on purpose. Democrats will either be staunch defenders of the sanctity of U.S. elections, who believe the loser in November's presidential vote must bow out graciously to protect democracy, or they will brace to fight possible defeat in court. And that's the absolute truth. And you know that that's the truth because if you go to the Transition Integrity Project, you see the 4 scenarios that they played out. And in every single scenario, the Democrat ticket did not accept the election results. And not only that, but they made it seem as if Trump didn't accept the election results. It was somehow an evil thing that he was doing, even though that's their plan from right now. It's already their plan to contest the results. If Trump contests the results, then he's just refusing to step down from power, when both sides are legally allowed to do some things and legally are not allowed to do some things. They've already set it up now to where if Trump questions anything, he's just a dictator trying to stay in power, and they're trying to rile up the military to do something about it. Former U.S. Vice President Al Gore, who narrowly lost the controversial 2000 election to Republican George W. Bush, told Reuters on Tuesday that President Donald Trump would be forced from office next January 20th if he doesn't leave willingly, because the military and security forces would answer to the new president at that point. Quote, "It's not really up to him," Gore said. So we got Gore, Pelosi, Clinton, all saying the same things. The military is going to have to eventually oust Trump. Isn't it funny that when John Podesta was playing the role of Joe Biden in the Transition Integrity Project, at the end of one of the scenarios, he threw up his arms and said, we'll have to just see what the military does at this point. They could come to no resolution. They had done so many things to stain our voting in America. I feel like I can't get this report out to the people who need to read it, because they need to read it, because it shows them exactly what they're going to do. It shows the world exactly what they're going to do, no matter what the scenario is. There's 4 scenarios, and no matter, even if in like scenario 4, where Trump wins by a landslide and wins the popular vote, they are still going to find a way to contest the election. That's what I want to get through to everybody. It's going to be a contested election regardless. That's already a done deal. They're going to hire agitators. It says that in the TIP report. They're going to hire, quote, influencers. They're going to have protests in the streets, and they're already saying if those protests turn to riots, it will be because of subversive Donald Trump agents. I wake up today, and here is a story about Al Gore, and he's just right in lockstep with everybody else that was at that Transition Integrity Project, and they're already putting this seed in people's head. Hey, if Trump contests the election, then he's a dictator trying to stay in power, but we are going to contest the election for sure no matter what, and that's fine. There's so much information in that TIP report. It's unbelievable. But here's just another one coming out, and I can tell you it's going to keep getting worse. The violence will get worse. The protests will become more closer together in time, and they will become worse. They are eventually going to provoke a response. They want both sides out in the streets against each other. That is their prediction. They are going to contest the election no matter what, and they are going to count mail-in ballots until January 19th if need be. And if they can't find the ballots then, they will still refuse to concede and, quote, see where the military is at then. This is their plan that they war-gamed out. And every time a politician from, it doesn't matter if they're a never-Trumper or if they're a Democrat, every time they come out and they say these exact same things that Al Gore said, Nancy Pelosi said, Chuck Schumer said, Hillary Clinton said, it shows you that they were all wargaming off that same Transition Integrity Project report, and they're making moves now about it. Al Gore won't be the last that I report on. I just wish I had enough reach to get to a channel so that they could read it in detail. It's only 4 pages, but it is so enlightening. All right, let's move on to the next thing. And this is released August 11th. All enemies, foreign and domestic, an open letter to General Milley. And this is the 2 lieutenant colonels writing to the current Joint Chief of Staff, saying that if Trump refuses to concede in November, then he should be forcibly removed by the military. Now think about that. You have Hillary Clinton saying you should not concede, Biden saying he should not concede, Al Gore saying he should not concede, Nancy Pelosi saying Trump will be fumigated from the White House. All of this is happening at the same time that you have these officers writing to General Milley. It is very coordinated, and it is something that is very easy to see happening when you read the Transition Integrity Project. When you read the TIP report, you can see why every Democrat move that's being made now is being made. And there are way more military that support Trump than the other way around. But because of the media narrative that's being pushed, people don't believe that. And that's what matters right now. Perception is what matters. It has to be countered. Looking at the report, it's just a roadmap. We can tell you where we're headed. We are heading to a contested election. Trump's going to win. Okay, let me make my prediction. And this is a prediction, guys. So I hate to make predictions, but let me just say, I think Trump will win an electoral college landslide. I think he could possibly lose the popular vote, and most likely will even win the popular vote. But he could possibly lose the popular vote. In the meantime, the Democrats will refuse to concede. Paper ballots will still be discovered and be counting for over a month. The transition will supposed to be happen in January, and up till transition day, we will be inundated with horrible examples of election fraud, violence on the streets from both sides, horrible media lies being pumped through our televisions, and it'll all be coordinated by subversive agents like the ones that attacked Rand Paul. It is paramount that we get to the bottom of this. When we see all these seemingly separate attacks, they are coordinated, and they are all deep state actors. So the question becomes, is this just an answer to the Democrats' question of whether or not they can get the military involved as they had war gamed out? Or is this some kind of preemptive thing where General Milley is working with the Democrats in order to get a public letter sent to him so that he can make a public response that boxes the military in? I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me know in the description. Like, share, sub the channel. Peace.